The battlefield opens with two men facing each other. One stands with confidence, the other remains tense and silent. The signal to begin is given, and the confident fighter moves first. He charges forward without hesitation, convinced of his victory, supported by the cheers coming from behind him. The moment passes in an instant. The charge ends before it truly begins, and the confident man is already on the ground, defeated. The outcome is decisive and absolute. He is Weiss Vincent, known as the villainous noble. From the moment he loses to the protagonist, Alan, everything begins to collapse. His status, his future, and his worth are stripped away. In the end, he is reduced to a disposable shield for the Demon King, where his life comes to an unremarkable end. At the same time, the player controlling the game meets an abrupt death. Elsewhere, inside a quiet house, a maid is kneeling on the floor, crying. A man stands behind her, poised to punish her. Then his expression shifts. Something changes without warning, and confusion replaces intent. The man looks at her, uncertain of who she is or where he has ended up. Confusion settles in as he struggles to understand what is happening. The maid in front of him feels unfamiliar, as does the room around him. His posture shifts as disbelief takes hold, the situation no longer aligning with his sense of reality. Only moments earlier, he had been playing a game. Now, a bound woman is positioned directly in front of him. The maid reacts to his silence, addressing him familiarly and calling him by the name Weiss. He notices her appearance for the first time, struck by a sense of recognition he cannot place. The name lingers, unsettling in its familiarity. Drawn by instinct, he turns toward a mirror and looks at his own reflection, confronting the identity that now seems to belong to him. The realization settles in without delay. He understands that he has become Weiss Vincent, the villainous and abusive noble. The name, the role, and the setting align with memories from a familiar school fantasy game he has completed many times. Weiss Vincent is the villain who obstructs the protagonist, Alan, during the Academy arc, a noble who abuses authority, targeting the weak without restraint. That path always ends the same way. After being decisively defeated by the protagonist, Weiss loses everything. Stripped of status and value, he becomes a servant to the Demon King. His life concludes when he is used as a shield and discarded. Returning to the present, his attention shifts back to the girl bound before him. He recognizes her as Lilith Scarlet, the maid. The realization brings discomfort. Weiss had taken pleasure in tormenting her. The memory of that behavior feels foreign and unsettling when placed against her current state. He moves to untie her, acting on impulse. Halfway through, he hesitates. A sudden shift in behavior could raise suspicion. Lilith watches him closely, disbelief evident as his hands stop. Unable to leave her as she is, he decides to end the situation for now. As she stands, he notices a bruise on her neck. Her body trembles, restrained and fearful. He attempts to heal her, uncertain if it will work. The magic responds immediately. The bruise fades without a trace. The ability is real. It is a healing spell hidden by the developers, usable from the very beginning and only mentioned in a strategy guide. He turns back to Lilith and makes his intent clear through his actions, distancing himself from concern and framing it as practice rather than kindness. Lilith remains silent for a moment. Then her expression softens, and she thanks him. She is surprised, noting that she had never known he could use healing magic. He is left unsettled. Despite knowing that her suffering was caused by the role he now inhabits, her gratitude is directed toward him all the same. The thought lingers that her gratitude may be the result of prolonged abuse, obedience shaped by fear rather than trust. The realization weighs on him. He calls Lilith over and offers a sincere apology, making it clear through his actions that the mistreatment will not continue. Lilith reacts with visible confusion, unsure how to process the sudden change. Later, at the dining table, Zevis Alden, the Vincent family's butler, serves Weiss his meal. Zevis appears tense and uneasy, bracing for the familiar reaction. Normally, the food would be criticized and discarded without thought. Instead, Weiss addresses him directly. He acknowledges his past behavior and admits fault for treating the meals carelessly. He notes that the seasoning is well balanced that day. The room falls silent. Zevis freezes, then breaks into emotional excitement, overwhelmed by the unexpected praise. He expresses deep gratitude, clearly shaken by the words. The surrounding staff react with admiration, praising Weiss as admirable. Weiss observes their reactions and realizes how drastic the contrast must be. They see growth where, in truth, someone entirely different now occupies the role. The response only reinforces how cruel the former Weiss must have been. He makes a quiet decision. From that moment forward, he resolves not to bring suffering to those around him, especially the servants. His first action is simple and symbolic. He takes his baton and disposes of it outside, severing himself from the tool of past cruelty. Even so, he understands that change must go further. As a noble, Weiss is expected to attend a prestigious academy at the age of 15. The entrance examination is only 2 years away. In the original course of events, his defeat by the protagonist during the combat test marked the beginning of his downfall, followed by a steady collapse in reputation. That defeat has not happened yet. The future is no longer fixed. With that realization, Weiss commits himself fully. He throws the baton away and steels his resolve, determined to avoid the ruin that once awaited him, regardless of the cost. Outside, his body is drenched in sweat after intense training. Exhausted, he pauses to rest when someone addresses him sharply. It is Milk Avitas, an S-rank adventurer overseeing his training. She questions whether he is taking it seriously. Weiss confirms his effort but admits his body has reached its limit and asks for a short break. Milk allows it, but reminds him that weakness will earn him ridicule the moment he enrolls. The provocation sparks something within him. With a strained smile, he forces himself back to his feet and resumes training, pushing forward despite the fatigue. Weiss relies on his family's influence to secure a teacher far beyond the ordinary. Milk Avitas, a figure who appears later in the game, is known as the swordsman closest to the strongest in the royal capital. From the beginning, he makes his position clear through his actions, placing himself under her instruction with no expectation of mercy. Her training is relentless, marked by severity and fear. During one of these sessions, Lilith approaches from behind and hands Weiss the item he requested. She notices the writing engraved on it and looks to him for clarification. The words represent a resolve to give everything, even at the cost of one's life. Noblesse oblige is remembered as a death game. Its difficulty demands repeated attempts, where mistakes are punished without hesitation. Weiss understands the weight of that design. Poor preparation leads not only to failure, but to expulsion or death. Time cannot be wasted. Despite that resolve, his body is unprepared. He has never trained properly, neither in this life nor the one before. The exhaustion is overwhelming, yet unavoidable. Each day begins with basic forms, followed by endless running to build stamina, and brutal strength training that pushes his limits. From morning until night, the cycle repeats without rest. When night falls, Zavis prepares the meals Weiss specifically requested, carefully planned and rich in protein. Weiss acknowledges the effort, aware that he is adding to Zavis's workload, despite the butler's many responsibilities. 2 weeks pass. Injuries are treated through recovery magic, but Weiss understands that physical growth depends just as much on proper diet. With Zavis's continued support and careful management, he endures even when his body is pushed close to collapse. By the 3rd week, the training has become suffocating. Each day stretches unbearably long, yet time moves forward regardless. Before he realizes it, the sun has already set once again. His body has finally begun to adapt to the physical demands. With that foundation in place, Weiss prepares to take the next step and calls for his magic instructor. Fatigue from Milk's strict sword training has already taken its toll on Weiss. With his body pushed to its limits, he allows himself a small hope that the magic instructor will be gentler. At his request, Zavis lets the teacher enter. Weiss waits, wondering what kind of person will appear. The teacher steps forward, greets him, and removes her magic hat. She introduces herself as Mil Avitas. The moment recognition sets in, Weiss drops to his knees in shock, realizing it is her once again. Milk makes it clear that her expertise extends beyond swordsmanship. She is also a master of magic, greeting him as if this reunion were only natural. Weiss struggles to understand why she has appeared in the same role once more. Without speaking aloud, he directs his frustration towards Zavis, convinced he had specifically asked for a kind instructor. Zavis calmly explains that Milk is a rare genius, a magic swordsman capable of wielding 2 of the 4 great elemental attributes. Milk notices the exchange regardless. She asks whether Weiss would prefer gentle instruction. The fact that she perceives their silent interaction leaves him stunned. She reassures him that she will handle his magic training gently, emphasizing her professionalism. The promise lasts only moments. Magic training begins, and the atmosphere turns severe. Weiss is pushed to channel more power without hesitation, forced to maintain focus under constant pressure. The intensity quickly surpasses his expectations. His composure breaks under the strain, and the hardship proves even worse than sword training. Milk shows no sign of easing up, pressing him to continue for hours longer without pause. She explains that magic requires mana, and mana can only be increased through relentless repetition. The method is simple and merciless. The training is to continue until his body gives out completely. From that day onward, Weiss's routine expands. Alongside foundational magic practice, he is subjected to practical combat drills using wooden swords. The workload becomes heavier, the demands sharper. During one session, Milk strikes him cleanly, knocking him to the ground. The mistake is immediate and obvious. His stance is riddled with openings. Lilith rushes to his side and heals his injuries. Milk confirms that she will also provide healing support, but only so he can continue pushing himself further. Weiss accepts the support with gratitude and forces himself back into training. The effort still feels unfamiliar to him. Someone who once avoided responsibility, who abandoned challenges without hesitation, is now enduring relentless training day after day. In his past life, he existed without direction, escaping whenever pressure arose. He surrendered before anything could truly begin. The difference between then and now remains unclear, yet the result is undeniable. 2 months pass since the training began. Weiss sits on the ground, resting his exhausted body. Milk approaches and pats his head. She acknowledges his progress, noting that he reached his target in a fraction of the time it once took. The gesture feels at odds with her definition of gentle instruction. Milk confirms it without hesitation. Each milestone Weiss reaches earns him a small reward, simple but consistent. The balance still feels uneven to him, as though the hardship outweighs the encouragement. Milk dismisses the concern. Before the thought can settle, Lilith arrives and places lunch beside him. Milk explains that her role is only to apply pressure. The encouragement Weiss needs already exists around him. He is reminded not to overlook those who support him quietly, providing the strength that allows him to endure the strain. The realization comes naturally. His progress is not the result of effort alone. Lilith's constant presence, Zevis's careful preparation of meals, and Milk's uncompromising guidance all shape his growth. Without them, he would not have made it this far. The Weiss of the past and the man he once was before this life only looked inward. No one stood beside them. No one corrected them. What he lacked was balance, support that could be kind and severe at the same time. Until now, his goal had been simple. He wanted to survive. He wanted to avoid ruin. Those were desires born purely from self-preservation. That changes here. He does not want to see Lilith or the others burdened by his failure. He wants to show them the results of their faith. For himself, and for those who stand with him, Weiss resolves to avoid the path of destruction. The training resumes without pause. Milk sets the next objective, raising the threshold higher once again. Weiss is driven forward, pressed to his limits, as the cycle of growth continues. Panel freeze, important choice ahead. Subscribe and continue the story like a true reader. Somewhere in town, Weiss walks alongside Milk and Lilith. The atmosphere is light, and the outing feels unusually relaxed as the three move together through the streets. They are in League Belt Town. In the game, this is the first city the protagonist reaches, a place known for its rough edges and disorder. As they continue walking, raised voices draw their attention. An argument nearby escalates into a fight over cheating, confirming that the town's security remains poor. Weiss observes the two men clashing, then shifts his focus to Milk, curious about who his own opponent will be. 3 months have passed since Weiss began his training. With that milestone reached, he has been assigned a practical test, and this city has been chosen as the stage. The nature of the test remains unclear. The possibility of real combat crosses his mind, perhaps against an ordinary thug. His uncertainty deepens when he notices the unusual smile on Milk's face. Milk shows no concern, giving the impression that she intends to select an opponent worthy of him. From behind, Lilith offers her support, staying close. Despite that, Weiss cannot relax. Sweat gathers as tension builds. Nearby, a group of men notices them. Their attention lingers, particularly on Lilith, and their behavior turns crude and provocative. They openly mock Weiss for walking through the town, accompanied by beauty. Weiss and Lilith hear the remarks, but do not respond. Weiss remains restrained, aware that Milk's presence alone is enough to deter escalation. League Belt Town has a reputation as the worst of its kind, a gathering place for thugs and troublemakers. Regardless of Milk's strength, Weiss understands that protecting Lilith is his responsibility. His hand tightens as the men continue to linger. Lilith, for her part, shows clear irritation. Weiss remains on edge. Milk signals that the men are beneath notice, not worth their attention. Lilith accepts this calmly. As Weiss looks at her, he senses a sharp intensity beneath her composed expression, something dangerous and focused. He questions whether it is merely his imagination as they continue forward. Inside the Adventurers Guild, 3 men corner a young boy and pressure him to follow them outside. The child's unease is obvious. Nearby, Weiss notices the situation and recognizes the men at once. They are the Boudin brothers, the opponents chosen for him. From a window overlooking the street, Milk surveys the scene and lays out their history through her explanation. The brothers are responsible for a long list of crimes, including assault, robbery, kidnapping, murder, and slave trading. Their actions have gone unchecked for years through bribery. That protection has now collapsed, with the corrupt military police already arrested. What remains is dealing with the brothers themselves. They are hardened criminals, beyond restraint. That makes them suitable opponents for Weiss's first real battle. Weiss accepts this on the surface and turns as if to leave, instinctively resisting what lies ahead. Milk stops him. Despite his resolve, Weiss lacks real combat experience. Avoiding this moment will only delay the inevitable. True combat cannot be avoided forever, and facing it now, under supervision, is safer than encountering it alone later. Milk makes it clear that this protection will not always be there. The next real fight may come without warning, without support. Many have died simply because they lacked experience when that moment arrived. She reminds him that she is present now. If the situation turns dangerous, she will intervene. With that assurance, she pushes Weiss forward toward his first true battle, urging him to face it head-on and step into combat with confidence. Weiss finds Milk's presence reassuring. That sense of security fades almost immediately. When he looks around again, she is gone. Lilith is gone as well. Weiss is left walking alone with the Boudin brothers. Only then does he realize he has been misled. He challenged them, believing support was close at hand. Now, one of the brothers leads him toward an alley, sealing the situation. Nervous tension tightens around him. Retreat is no longer an option. Turning back out of fear would only make things worse. With no escape, he steels himself and prepares for what is coming. The objective is clear. Disabling one of them is enough. There is no need to kill. Even so, the reality is grim. It is 3 against 1. Victory in a fair fight is uncertain. Despite their rough appearance, the brothers are skilled fighters. Once inside the alley, violence will be unavoidable. Weiss understands he must act before that happens. He searches for a plan, recalling Milk's words from earlier. She had told him that following her instructions would be enough to survive. At a distance, Milk and Lilith observe Weiss being led away. Lilith is unsettled by the deception, sensing its cruelty. Milk remains firm, believing that without this push, Weiss would never commit fully. She views reliance on rescue as a flaw. Training that assumes someone will intervene is meaningless. Even so, she keeps watch. If the situation truly turns dangerous, she is prepared to step in. Behind them, the group of men from earlier recognizes Milk and Lilith. They close in, identifying them as the women they noticed in town. Lilith turns as they surround her. Their attention is intrusive and deliberate. The timing, from their perspective, could not be better. The group of men steps forward, introducing themselves as the band of thieves that control the area. One remarks that they were simply short on girls to occupy their evening. Behind them, 3 girls sit bound, helpless. Suddenly, a splash of blood catches the attention of the 2 Boudin brothers. Their other brother stands there, one hand severed, the result of Weiss's first strike. This is exactly what Milk had instructed before he engaged. Move first. The lesson is clear. In battle, the first strike that catches an opponent off guard can overpower any defense. A master of magic can be killed before a barrier is even formed. A martial arts expert can fall if struck before bracing. The principle is simple. Act before the enemy has a chance to act. The remaining 2 brothers react with fury and encircle Weiss. He responds without hesitation, kicking one brother behind him. As the fight unfolds, Weiss reflects on himself. He had always delayed decisions, assuming that tomorrow's him would handle the consequences. But time solves nothing. From this moment on, he must act in seconds, decisively and without hesitation. He resolves to shed the lazy version of himself and step fully into the man he wants to become. Each strike, each movement, is calculated. The fight is fierce but brief. Weiss overpowers the Boudin brothers and succeeds. In retrospect, he realizes the importance of his timing. Had he entered the alley with hesitation, all 3 brothers would have prepared their defenses simultaneously, their mana and combat readiness overwhelming him. He won because he struck first, moving before the enemy could respond. Nearby, Milk assesses his performance. Full points in her mind, yet she tempers it to 70. Were it her, she would have severed an arm inside the guild itself, a proactive approach. Lilith, on the other hand, celebrates him fully, awarding Weiss 200 points in her silent approval. Weiss notices a smear of blood on Lilith's clothing. She quickly dismisses it as his imagination, hiding the mark. News spreads quickly. A newspaper reports that over 20 members of the notorious band of thieves have been arrested. There are no fatalities, but the criminals have been thoroughly beaten and rendered incapable of resistance. The Boudin brothers are among those taken into custody, a direct result of Weiss Vincent's intervention. An unknown girl reading the report wonders who Weiss really is. In the aftermath, the Vincent family receives a letter of gratitude, accompanied by a cash gift, acknowledging Weiss's decisive action and the resolution of the city's criminal threat. Weiss's growth has become unmistakable. 1 year and 6 months have passed since his training began, and the difference is overwhelming. Each day still brings relentless training, but the limits that once stopped him no longer apply. Running out of stamina and collapsing from mana exhaustion are no longer part of his routine. His awareness has sharpened to the point where he can sense enemies through walls. Mana flows through his body clearly now, responsive and controlled. The progress is undeniable. As evening settles in, Weiss eats his dinner while Zevis approaches to check on him. The conversation turns to his training, and Weiss confirms that his magic practice is progressing steadily. He reflects on the severity of Milk's methods. Training the 4 elemental attributes, fire, water, wind, and earth, without neglecting any of them is extreme. Even so, Weiss demonstrates his control, displaying all 4 elements in succession. Zevis watches in quiet astonishment. Milk's reputation for cruelty resurfaces in comparison, her training described as harsher than the criminals Weiss once subdued. Yet Zevis understands the reason. Such intensity exists because Weiss's talent exceeds normal standards. Magic users are typically limited to a single element. Even elite adventurers like Milk can wield only 2. Weiss, however, commands all 4. It is an exceptionally rare aptitude. Zevis reflects on what might have been. Had Weiss remained idle, this potential would have stayed buried forever. In the past, Zevis was troubled by Weiss's negligence. Now, he is confronted with a young noble who has endured without surrender, pushing himself day after day to reach this level. By the time Zevis turns to voice his admiration, Weiss has already gone. Outside, Weiss is caught off guard, apologizing and bracing himself as Milk holds a wooden sword. Lilith steps between them in time, stopping Milk. Milk's attention turns immediately to Weiss's training. She presses him about practicing magic beyond her instruction. Weiss apologizes again, clearly acknowledging that he has continued on his own. At her insistence, he prepares to demonstrate. Weiss steadies himself and releases 2 different elements in his hands. Milk observes closely and identifies them as light and dark. Beyond the 4 standard elements, Weiss has gained control over special attributes as well. The revelation prompts immediate scrutiny over why this ability was kept hidden. Weiss makes it clear that the magic is not yet complete. He has not fully mastered it, but he is capable of using it in its current state. The technique is his own creation. It combines light and dark magic into a single system. With Milk and Lilith watching, Weiss commits to completing it properly. He releases the spell, the result of a 1.5 years of uninterrupted effort. Both witnesses are visibly taken aback by the outcome. Time passes. Day turns to night. At a gathering inside a residence, voices overlap in casual conversation. Weiss sits among them, visibly tired. Lilith notices and checks on him, aware that he was active late into the night. Weiss questions whether his fatigue stands out in the setting, but confirms that his condition has already stabilized. By then, his original magic has been fully realized. Light-based healing magic restores allies, while dark-based curse poison weakens enemies. Combined, the technique functions as a single spell, continuously healing those recognized as allies within range, while inflicting curse damage on designated enemies. The spell is complete. The cost is severe. The mana consumption is overwhelming, and once the technique stabilizes, Weiss exhausts himself completely. Weiss understands that his training is still incomplete. His mana capacity remains insufficient, and further conditioning is necessary. As he rests, Lilith suddenly comes up with a way to rouse him. She decides to fetch strong alcohol and moves off at once. She disappears with swift, precise movements. Weiss notices her agility, sharp and controlled, resembling that of an assassin. A detail from the game's backstory surfaces in his awareness. Rumors of hidden guards within the Vincent household. For a brief moment, the possibility crosses his mind that Lilith could be one of them. He quickly dismisses the thought and lets it pass. Nearby, a woman approaches and calls out to him. When Weiss looks up, a beautiful figure stands before him. He recognizes her immediately. Cynthia, the daughter of Countess Violetta. Her shimmering hair and vivid red eyes are exactly as he remembers. From any angle, her presence is striking. There is no doubt about her identity. She is the main heroine of the game, Cynthia Violetta. She addresses him casually, noting the time since they last met, then studies his condition. His appearance seems unusually drained, as though he has just endured something exhausting. Weiss reacts stiffly. In the game's story, he was despised by nearly every character. Among them, Cynthia's hostility was the strongest. She was also the one directly tied to his eventual death. Standing before her now, Weiss becomes acutely aware of his position. As a member of the Vincent family, he had attended the gathering out of obligation. He questions the wisdom of appearing in such a place at all. An encounter with Cynthia was not something he expected before academy enrollment. He forces himself to remain composed. This is still before that turning point. He has not yet done anything that would earn her hatred. Without warning, a memory resurfaces with vivid clarity. The perspective shifts to that of the former Weiss. He sees Cynthia before him and struggles to grasp his own actions. The scene unfolds against his will. His eyes widen as he witnesses it. Cynthia being forced onto a bed, her mouth covered, her resistance silenced. The memory carries weight because it is not forgotten. Cynthia still remembers what was done to her. Using his noble status, Weiss had forced an invitation, dragged her into his room, and attempted to violate her with his hands. The past presses into the present, binding the two of them in a moment neither can ignore. As Weiss finishes processing the memory, Cynthia openly condemns him. The words land heavily, leaving no ambiguity in her judgment. She questions his presence at the gathering, challenging how someone like him could appear so openly. The weight of the former Weiss's actions presses down on him. The resentment directed at him is overwhelming, enough to make the situation feel suffocating. There is no room for excuses. Faced with this, Weiss does the only thing left to him. He lowers his head and offers a sincere apology. He takes full responsibility, acknowledging that what he did was entirely his fault and an act unbecoming of a noble. The remorse is unmistakable and unembellished. He does not expect forgiveness. Even so, Cynthia is not the kind of person who would exploit someone genuinely reflecting on their wrongdoing. Seeing Weiss bow his head in front of others, she recognizes the sincerity of his apology. It is something she never imagined him capable of. Her expression softens, and a faint smile appears. Weiss senses a subtle change. Even if only slightly, the tension eases. If this reduces the chance of his eventual downfall, even marginally, it is enough. For now, this is all he can do. He decides it would be best to leave once the moment allows. In another life, he admired Cynthia as a character in the story. Now, standing before her, he understands the distance between them. They are too different, separated by circumstance and history. Like light and darkness, their paths were never meant to cross. A disgraced noble approaching a refined young lady could only lead to ruin. Accepting that reality, Weiss prepares to withdraw. Then, without warning, Cynthia reaches out and takes his hand. The two lock eyes, the moment freezing in place. From a short distance away, Lilith notices their closeness and stops in surprise. Cynthia invites Weiss to dance. The request leaves both Weiss and Lilith stunned. As the music carries on around them, Cynthia steps forward and begins to dance, her movements deliberate and graceful, drawing Weiss into the center of the gathering as all eyes turn toward them. After some time, Weiss and Cynthia sit together over tea. The atmosphere is calm. Cynthia observes the pleasant weather and the sound of birds nearby. Weiss mirrors her observation, responding stiffly, his agreement coming out awkward and restrained. As the moment settles, Weiss questions why Cynthia is now at his residence. The path that led here traces back to that night, their unexpected meeting at the gathering, the formal dance she initiated, and the way events unfolded without him fully understanding why. Cynthia had noticed his confusion even then, and acknowledged that she was aware of the change in him. Word of his daily training and preparation for academy enrollment had already spread among the nobility. Through rumors and quiet conversations, Cynthia had learned that Weiss was no longer the person he once was. During the dance, she brought up his claim that he did not remember much about the incident from the past. The memory of the attempted assault resurfaced heavily. Weiss acknowledged it and struggled with the fact that no apology could truly address what had been done. Cynthia closed the distance between them, drawing him nearer. She questioned whether his forgetfulness extended further, reminding him that he had once claimed to have feelings for her. Weiss was left unsettled and unsure. Before he could process the moment, the music ended. Applause filled the room, marking the conclusion of the dance. Cynthia took her leave shortly after, departing with a simple farewell. She left behind a lasting impression, one that lingered long after she was gone. That night was not the end of their connection. Later, at the Vincent residence, Weiss receives a letter from his father, Agato Vincent. The contents catch him off guard. A formal dinner is to be held at his home, with Cynthia as the guest. The timing leaves no room for preparation. The event is scheduled for the same day. Before Weiss can fully grasp the situation, Cynthia's arrival is announced. She is already outside. An uneasy feeling settles over him as preparations begin. The staff moves quickly to ready the house. Amid the activity, Lilith notices something unusual on the table. Alongside the letter from Weiss's father lies another envelope, hidden within, waiting to be opened. The sequence brings Weiss and Cynthia back to the present. As the moment settles, Weiss directs his frustration toward his father, questioning the intent behind the old man's decisions. Despite that irritation, he is quietly glad to be sharing tea with Cynthia. She is someone he cares for, yet someone he cannot afford to draw close to. In the original course of events, Cynthia was meant to end up with the protagonist, Alan. Weiss understands that growing closer to her risks disrupting those events. If the future shifts, he loses the ability to act according to the known scenario. That realization sparks irritation. Even defeating Alan during the test could cause small changes, but taking the main heroine away would unravel everything that follows. Being disliked would be dangerous, but being liked too much would be just as damaging. Weiss decides that maintaining a precise distance is the only option. While he is caught in these thoughts, Cynthia draws his attention back to the table. She recalls how he once confessed that he had fallen for her at first sight and asks whether he has forgotten it. Weiss's expression tightens. Cynthia notes that the confession had come too suddenly and carried a hint of arrogance, which had left her dissatisfied at the time. She then adds that if he were now offering a sincere apology, she would not be opposed to it. Weiss struggles to process her words. To him, Cynthia appears noble and composed, yet beneath that, she reveals a gentle side. That contrast unsettles him. The moment he thinks it would be dangerous for her feelings to deepen, it seems to be happening anyway. He recalls that in the original story, her affection for the protagonist developed at an unusually fast pace. Cynthia may be soft-hearted, but once she falls in love, her devotion becomes absolute. Weiss concludes that he needs to find a way to lower her affection toward him. Cynthia continues to look at him with admiration, remarking that his quiet demeanor comes across as shy and endearing. Weiss realizes that this is going wrong, as his favorability is increasing on its own. As the moment lingers, an awkward sound escapes him just as Lilith steps in from behind to refill his tea. Weiss grows embarrassed at having let out such an undignified noise. Even so, he briefly considers that it might help. He reasons that hearing something so crude could cool Cynthia's feelings. However, Cynthia remains focused on him, still viewing him with fond admiration and quietly thinking of him as cute. Weiss comes to the conclusion that Cynthia is beyond reason in this regard, and that he needs to act quickly to address the situation. Lilith remains quietly attentive as Cynthia turns the conversation toward a matter Weiss has not heard about. She asks whether his father mentioned anything to him earlier that day, but it becomes clear that Weiss is completely unaware. Cynthia then explains the reason behind the gathering. The dinner party was intended as their formal introduction, arranged by their parents without prior discussion. It was meant to mark the beginning of an engagement decided entirely by the adults. After spending time with Weiss that day, Cynthia herself chose to accept the arrangement. Elsewhere, Weiss's father is occupied with his own work, grumbling about what a troublesome son Weiss can be. His bodyguards watch as he repeatedly stabs at something in front of him. He remarks that Weiss resembles him in appearance, sharing the same good looks, but notes that his son is far too shy when it comes to romantic matters. He takes satisfaction in the fact that Weiss finally had the chance to dance with the well-known Cynthia. Regarding the engagement, he had acted immediately, settling everything without hesitation, believing it would make his son happy. When one of the bodyguards questions whether Weiss had agreed to this, Ageto dismisses the concern. As his father, he claims he can read his son's desires just by looking at his face. He orders the bodyguard to stop complaining and instead assist him with opening a tunnel in the sand structure they are shaping in the playground. Later, outside Weiss's residence, Cynthia departs. As she leaves, Weiss's expression hardens with anger. What his father arranged was far more than a simple tea party. It was the groundwork for an engagement with Cynthia. While marriages decided by parents are common among noble families, this was not a political union or a strategic alliance. Instead, it appears his father coordinated directly with the Violetta family purely out of a desire to please his son. In the original story, Ageto barely appeared at all and rarely returned home, leaving Weiss with no understanding of what kind of father he was. Now, that image becomes clear. Ageto embodies the extreme of an overly indulgent parent. In that moment, Weiss begins to grasp the deepest reason why the former Weiss ultimately became a villain. After Cynthia leaves, Weiss turns toward Lilith and finds her in tears. The sight catches him off guard. Lilith asks him to be happy with Cynthia Violetta, then suddenly runs off. Weiss briefly notices how fast she moves but quickly dismisses it. What matters more is understanding why she is crying. At the gate, Milk stops him and bluntly states that today's assignment is to chase Lilith. She asks whether he understands the reason for Lilith's tears. Without waiting, Milk explains it herself. The man Lilith had supported for a year and a half was suddenly taken away by a young lady who appeared without warning. Even if the engagement was not Weiss's choice, Milk makes it clear that he is not allowed to ignore the fact that Lilith was hurt by it. Milk orders Weiss to bring Lilith back to the mansion. If he fails, she threatens him with punishment. Weiss agrees without hesitation and immediately runs after Lilith. As he runs, Weiss begins to understand Milk's point. Lilith has always been at his side. There is no way she would not be shaken by the engagement. Beyond that, he owes her more than he had ever properly acknowledged. Lilith notices Weiss chasing after her. Weiss realizes that without her support, he would have remained lazy and stagnant. The reason he was able to push himself forward was because Lilith was there. Just as he begins to close the distance between them, Lilith suddenly accelerates and pulls away with ease, telling him to leave her alone. Even though Weiss is running with everything he has, he cannot catch up. The gap between them refuses to close, and the disbelief grows with every step. The chase carries them out of the grounds, through the forest, and toward the river. Weiss urges her to listen to him just once. Lilith responds that there is no need, accepting the situation as unavoidable because she is only a maid. Weiss immediately rejects that notion, making it clear that she is not merely a servant to him, but someone precious. He makes it known that the engagement was decided entirely by his father, not by his own will, his frustration spilling through his words. He then brings up the servant system at the Noble Academy, questioning whether Lilith is aware of how it works. At the Noblesse Magic Academy, where Weiss was to enroll, only the highest-ranking nobles were allowed an assigned servant as an exception. Weiss shouted that he intended to take Lilith with him, declaring that she was the one he trusted above all others. Lilith was moved by his words and asked if he was truly seeking her. Weiss, panting heavily from the chase, confirmed that this was the very reason he had been pursuing her. She pressed further, questioning whether he would continue to chase her forever. Struggling for breath and on the edge of losing consciousness, Weiss managed to affirm that he would. Understanding his determination, Lilith slowed, acknowledging his insistence. She began to declare that from now on, she would serve as Weiss-sama's personal attendant. Before she could finish, Weiss lost his footing and fell off a cliff, unconscious. Without hesitation, Lilith leapt after him, catching him in midair. She held him tightly, assuring him to be at ease, promising that she would do her best and that their relationship would remain a secret. Midair, Weiss regained consciousness as the moment settled into a quiet, shared understanding of their secret bond. They fell together into the water below, the world momentarily still around them, and so, Weiss became engaged to Cynthia while also forming a clandestine connection with Lilith. Elsewhere, the original game's protagonist pushed through intense training, fully prepared for the Academy's entrance, setting the stage for events yet to unfold. A few days later, the situation still feels unreal. In a short span of time, Weiss became engaged to Cynthia while also forming a secret relationship with Lilith. The sequence of events is so tangled that he struggles to fully process it. Most of the confusion traces back to his father, and Weiss quietly resolves that once Ageto returns from diplomatic duties, there will be no shortage of grievances waiting for him. Training resumes as usual, but Milk announces a shift in direction. The phase of basic drills comes to an end, and the group moves on to practical sparring. Milk asks whether Cynthia and Lilith have any prior experience with sparring. Both confirm that they do. Weiss is caught off guard, particularly by Lilith's answer. He had not expected her to already be familiar with such training. As if things were not complicated enough, there is another development. Both Cynthia and Lilith have joined the training sessions in preparation for the Academy entrance exam, scheduled a few months ahead. It turns out that they personally requested Milk to train them as well. Cynthia already possesses more than enough ability to pass the exam without difficulty. Lilith, on the other hand, was never required to take it at all. Weiss had originally planned for her to accompany him as his attendant. Still, Lilith wanted to support him academically, not just from the sidelines, and Weiss agreed to let her take the exam alongside him. In reality, neither of them truly needs the training. If anything, Cynthia's continued effort carries its own risk. Someone already guaranteed to pass, pushing herself even further, could grow into a far more formidable presence than she ever was in the original story. As Weiss drifts into these thoughts, Milk snaps him back to the present. She calls out to him and tosses a sword in his direction. Weiss catches it on instinct, signaling the start of the next phase of training. Milk declares that Weiss and Cynthia will spar first. She reminds Weiss that Cynthia being his fiancée is irrelevant here, and that he is not to hesitate or hold back. The warning only leaves him embarrassed, while Lilith cheers him on from behind. Milk orders the two of them to face each other. Before the sparring properly begins, she gives Weiss a pointed reminder, implying that he should already understand what matters most without needing a formal signal. Weiss is caught off guard, unsure of what she is getting at. Before he can fully grasp it, Cynthia is already in motion. She leaps forward, spinning into an attack. Weiss reacts just in time, noticing her movement and blocking the strike. Milk immediately reinforces the lesson she had taught before. The most important element in combat is the first move. Cynthia completes the thought through action. In the next instant, she vanishes from Weiss's field of view. Weiss sharpens his focus, his gaze darkening as he searches for her presence. Cynthia reappears from behind, launching another attack, but Weiss narrowly avoids it. Cynthia's fighting style becomes clear. She specializes in ice magic, infusing her legs with mana to move at high speed, gliding across the ground as if skating and striking from blind spots. Her attacks come one after another, fast and precise. Weiss manages to evade each one, carefully tracking her movements. In the brief moment she overextends, he spots an opening and strikes, landing a hit to her head. Cynthia cries out as the blow connects. Weiss immediately apologizes, but Milk brings the sparring to an end. Panic sets in as Weiss hurriedly explains that he had only intended a light tap, not a serious blow. Milk explains that Weiss's swing connected because striking, while Cynthia was moving at high speed, effectively turned it into a counterattack. What appeared to be a simple hit carried more impact due to her momentum. Cynthia is left frustrated. She has sparred many times at home before, yet this is the first time her attacks have been evaded so cleanly. Lilith steps in and heals the injury on Cynthia's head. The tension eases slightly as the treatment finishes. Milk then turns her attention to Weiss, questioning how he was able to follow Cynthia's high-speed movement. Given her speed, it should not have been easy. Weiss reacts blankly, unable to give a clear answer. Milk drops the matter, deciding they will find out soon enough whether it was mere coincidence. She announces that the next sparring match will be between Weiss and Lilith. Weiss is caught off guard, reacting in disbelief at the idea of fighting Lilith and having to spar again so soon. Milk shuts down any hesitation, noting that he is not exhausted and ordering him to stop complaining and continue. As Weiss and Lilith take their positions, Lilith appears calm and composed, clearly anticipating the match. Weiss responds casually, but internally, he dismisses the idea that he is facing someone who is merely a maid. That assumption quickly falters. He recalls witnessing Lilith's movements many times before, actions that never matched that title. He senses that lowering his guard here could be fatal. In the next instant, Lilith vanishes from his sight. Weiss stiffens in shock as she begins moving around him at extreme speed, her position constantly shifting. An attack suddenly comes from his side, and he barely manages to block it. The pressure mounts, frustration creeping in as another strike follows, forcing him to defend again. Milk observes the exchange closely. Weiss is clearly tracking Lilith's movements. The realization sets in that his ability to see through Cynthia's speed was not a fluke after all. Weiss struggles to make sense of the situation. In the original story, Lilith was nothing more than his attendant, a character with almost no presence. He never imagined she would possess this level of strength. She has only recently begun learning magic, yet her speed far surpasses his own. On top of that, she displays clear knowledge of swordsmanship, revealing a gap between what Weiss expected and the reality now unfolding before him. Weiss comes to a clear realization that holding back will lead to defeat. He raises his hands and a dark energy forms in his hands. He activates his original magic, a dark healing spell. The effect forces Lilith to halt instantly. Lilith recognizes it at once. It is Weiss's unique magic, a technique that restores allies within its circle while continuously inflicting curse damage on enemies caught inside. Her first instinct is to escape the area as quickly as possible. That thought fades when she notices Weiss has released his wooden sword, using both hands to maintain the spell. For the moment, he appears completely defenseless. She weighs her options. Even if she retreats now, her strength lies only in close combat. Leaving the circle would only result in being pressured from within by magic she cannot counter at range. She understands that this moment is her only opening. Lilith commits. She charges straight at Weiss. Weiss remains upright, composed, and unmoving. As Lilith's strike reaches him, it is stopped cold by an invisible barrier. The impact throws her backward. The technique reveals itself as Absolute Barrier, one of Weiss's original spells. It merges the defensive strength of light magic with the attributes of dark magic. Combined with the ability he has been using throughout the match, the Dark Eye, Weiss can track movements his body cannot physically match. Even if Lilith's speed surpasses his own, the combination allows him to continue defending as long as his mana holds. Milk shifts her focus to Lilith, pressing her on what she intends to do next. In that instant, Milk senses something wrong. She urgently orders Weiss to cancel the spell. Weiss hesitates, confused by the sudden warning. Before he can fully react, Lilith collapses, overwhelmed by dizziness. Milk rushes to her side, with Weiss close behind. Later, Lilith rests beneath a tree, seated and recovering. She openly acknowledges that she has been completely defeated by Weiss. Weiss apologizes immediately, checking to see if she is unharmed. Milk reassures him that she administered an advanced potion and that Lilith will recover without issue. With the immediate danger past, Milk turns her attention back to Weiss. What matters now is understanding the magic he just used. Milk understands that the spell drains vigor, but even so, she never expected Lilith of all people to collapse within seconds. She presses Weiss further, asking whether the magic carries additional effects. Weiss confirms that it does, and explains its nature. The dark healing magic inflicts layered debuffs on anyone who enters the magic circle. Physical strength weakens, vigor and vitality drop, mana is drained, magic and physical defenses are reduced, and both attack speed and movement speed decline. All of these effects are applied simultaneously. Lilith still possessed a relatively large mana reserve, and Weiss concludes that this is precisely why her mana was consumed so rapidly, leading to her collapse. As he continues, a powerful surge of energy gathers around Weiss's body. He explains that the effect on him is the complete opposite. Every stat drained from enemies within the circle is added to his own, strengthening him directly. The more opponents caught inside, the stronger he becomes. If he recognizes someone within the circle as an ally, he can extend the same enhancements to them as well. As Weiss looks at Milk, Cynthia, and Lilith together, a realization quietly settles in. The situation feels familiar, like the kind of turning point he had always imagined. A moment that seems almost designed for a declaration he once dreamed of making after being reborn into another world. The thought lingers, unspoken, as he wonders whether this is truly the right time. Before that thought can go any further, Milk turns her attention fully to him and challenges him to a duel. She is visibly energized by how much Weiss has grown. For her, it has been a long time since she felt this fired up. With a sharp, intimidating smile, she makes it clear that he will be held responsible for awakening that feeling, urging him to use his power to bring her back under control. From that point on, Cynthia and Lilith fully join the training. Days are filled with relentless Spartan sessions under Milk's guidance. Despite the constant proximity, the misunderstandings between Weiss, Cynthia, and Lilith remain unresolved. Time moves on quietly, days turning into weeks, weeks into months. Before any of them realize it, they are standing before the gates of the Noblesse Magic Academy. Entrance test day has arrived. The moment when Weiss's path will finally cross with that of the original protagonist has come. Quick break. Like and subscribe if you appreciate the work that goes into this manga. At the Noblesse Magic Academy, the largest campus in the world, the entrance examination is underway. As the kingdom's most prestigious institution, it draws attention from every corner, and today the grounds are filled with candidates. Nearby, a confrontation unfolds. A large, aggressive examinee corners a smaller boy, accusing him of staring. The boy insists otherwise, explaining that he was only taken aback by the man's size. The exchange escalates, and the bully swings his fist. Before it can land, Weiss steps in. He intercepts the punch cleanly and tightens his grip around the man's arm. Pain shoots through the bully, forcing him to recoil as he demands to know who interfered. Murmurs ripple through the crowd as recognition spreads. Some identify Weiss at once, recalling the infamous noble known for his abusive reputation. Others notice the girl beside him and realize she must be Cynthia of House Violetta. The engagement rumors quickly resurface, confirmed in hushed voices. Attention then turns to the remaining girl, her presence sparking curiosity, while some whisper in disbelief that Weiss has arrived at the entrance exam, accompanied by two striking women. The bully's demeanor changes the moment he realizes who he is facing. Fear overtakes him as he recognizes Weiss Vincent, the notorious noble. He hastily apologizes, begging not to be subjected to the cruelty associated with Weiss's name. Weiss shows no interest in such behavior. He makes it clear that he has no intention of abusing anyone and orders the man to leave. The bully does not hesitate, retreating immediately. As calm returns, Weiss reflects on how much time has passed since his reincarnation. Even now, the reputation of the former Weiss remains firmly attached to his name. He understands that if he wants to change how others see him, it will not happen all at once. He will need to remain approachable and let their perception shift gradually. 2 full years have passed since he began his training. Now, at last, the day of the Noblesse Magic Academy entrance test has arrived, and on this day, In this place, Weiss knows he must face a certain man. That man is the same boy he saved from the bully, the one that now stands before him as a fellow examinee. This is the moment Weiss finally comes face to face with Alan, the protagonist. Alan approaches with clear enthusiasm, confirming Weiss's identity and expressing his hope that they both pass the exam. He reaches out, intending to shake hands. Weiss hesitates. Before their hands meet, the warning bell rings, signaling the start of the examination. The moment passes unfinished as the girl accompanying Alan urges him to hurry. As Alan moves off, the girl glances back and offers her thanks for Weiss's earlier intervention. She is Cheryl Elias, Alan's childhood friend. While Alan and Cheryl head toward the exam area, Weiss remains where he is, unsettled by what just happened. The hesitation lingers. Even speaking with Alan filled him with a sense of discomfort he cannot explain. It is not dislike. His goal today is to defeat Alan in the exam, but afterward, he had intended to keep things amicable, maintaining a careful distance. Still, the unease refuses to fade. Soon after, the Duke announces the next phase of the entrance test, a practical combat examination. The examinees are instructed to change into the provided uniforms. These are hand-me-downs from former students, designed to reduce damage from both magic and physical attacks. As preparations begin, Weiss's restlessness deepens. His heart pounds without reason. A violent impulse surfaces, sharp and intrusive. He wants to crush Alan, not only him, but everyone present. The thought alarms him, and he struggles to understand where it is coming from. Nearby, the Duke reiterates the rules. Victory is decided by knocking an opponent out of the ring or forcing them to surrender, and he will intervene if the situation becomes too dangerous. He asks if there are any questions. The earlier bully raises a hand to complain about the uniform being too small. Others quickly follow, voicing similar grievances about the size and condition of the gear. The Duke grows visibly irritated. He dismisses the complaints, remarking on how oversized the candidates are for their age. He makes it clear that those who pass will receive proper uniforms tailored to them, but for now, they will have to endure it. With that, the Duke cuts off further discussion and orders the examination to begin. Nearby, Lilith notes how impressive it is that the Academy managed to prepare uniforms for every examinee. Because of that effort, the atmosphere already feels as if they have officially enrolled. Cynthia responds by pointing out that many students abandon their uniforms and disappear after entering, a sign of how unforgiving life at the Academy truly is. Weiss silently agrees. The Noblesse Magic Academy is both the most prestigious and the most brutal institution in the kingdom. Anyone unable to keep up is expelled without hesitation. The curriculum is so severe that some students never even make it through alive. Many who leave discard their uniforms, wanting nothing more to do with the place. Even so, gaining admission itself is not especially difficult. In the original story, even the former Weiss, who lacked motivation entirely, managed to pass. The Duke announces the next match. Examinee number 909, Weiss Vincent, will face examinee number 907, Alan. As preparations continue, one man approaches his instructor, pointing out that the rain is beginning to fall heavily. The response is brief and accepting. It cannot be helped. All examinees not currently competing are ordered to move to the spectator seats. Soon after, Weiss and Alan step onto the battlefield, facing one another under the overcast sky. Alan appears genuinely pleased, having never expected to face Weiss in the mock battle, and clearly intends to give it his all. From behind him, Cheryl calls out encouragement, urging him not to lose. Weiss offers no response. Behind him instead, Lilith raises her voice, urging him onward. With the spectators settling in and rain beginning to fall, the long-awaited confrontation finally takes shape. The mock battle begins, and Weiss moves the instant it starts. He closes the distance and strikes Alan across the face with his wooden sword. The impact sends Alan flying backward across the ring. Without hesitation, Weiss releases the sword and activates his magic. A dark magic circle spreads beneath them. Pain immediately takes hold within its boundary. Alan suffers inside the circle as its effects begin to drain him. Shock spreads through the spectators. Cheryl freezes, Cynthia stiffens, and Lilith's expression tightens. Even the referee standing nearby feels an unnatural sensation while caught within the circle's influence. Inside the ring, Weiss realizes something is wrong. The sensation he has been struggling to suppress surges again. The urge is no longer faint or distant. It burns, demanding release. He feels an overwhelming desire to crush his opponent. Weiss searches for the source of that feeling. It has been there since earlier, growing stronger with every moment. His thoughts turn to the former Weiss, the one who once occupied this body. He wonders if this violent impulse belongs to him, if it is something left behind. The presence feels sharp and predatory, pressing forward without restraint. Before Alan can recover, Weiss closes in. He seizes Alan by the collar and lifts him off the ground, the dark magic still pulsing beneath them as the match teeters on the edge of losing control. After the entrance examinations conclude, Weiss's results quickly draw attention. The headmaster summons Milk and Zevis, demanding an explanation. He admits that he never imagined Weiss Vincent would dominate the exams to such an extent. Every score Weiss achieved stands at the top. The old man, Gilles, headmaster of the Noblesse Magic Academy, wants to know who was responsible for raising someone like him. Gilles questions what they think of Weiss, given the danger implied by his abilities. Milk and Zevis offer no immediate response. At that moment, Darius requests permission to speak. Darius, one of the Academy's instructors, addresses the headmaster calmly. While Weiss's scores are indeed the highest ever recorded, he points out that Weiss did not technically break every record. He asks whether the headmaster has already forgotten last year's incoming student. Gilles recalls it soon after, noting that Weiss actually tied for first place with that girl. Milk finally speaks, stating that she did nothing exceptional for Weiss. At most, she provided him with basic training. Zevis follows, claiming the same on his end. He says his role was limited to supporting Weiss with meals and making sure he consumed plenty of protein. This draws Darius's attention. Zevis elaborates, listing soy products, dairy, and chicken tenders among the foods he provided. Darius reacts sharply, slamming the table and accusing Zevis of making light of the situation. He emphasizes that Weiss has mastered not only the 4 major attributes, but also creation magic, light, and dark. That level of achievement cannot be explained by diet alone. Milk responds that she has nothing more to add and takes a drink from her alcohol. Darius immediately scolds her for drinking in front of the headmaster and demands to know who supplied it. Milk lowers her head onto the table without answering. Zevis stands and explains that it appears she brought it with her herself. Gilles silences Darius and reminds him that Milk has always behaved this way. Darius acknowledges that much, but his frustration remains. He fixates on Alan, pointing out how close he came to dying because of Weiss. Alan was trained, gifted, and talented, yet even that was nearly not enough. Before the accusation can fully unfold, Milk cuts in sharply. She challenges whether Darius intends to carry the same complaints onto the battlefield. She calls out the ugliness of jealousy and accuses him of venting his resentment simply because he lost a serious match. Darius tries to argue that this situation could have been avoided if Weiss had been guided properly from the beginning. He is interrupted once again, this time by Zevis. Calmly, Zevis tells them to stop and addresses the headmaster directly. He recognizes Gilles' concerns regarding Weiss's enrollment, but assures him of one thing. Weiss never directs his power toward the weak. He has changed. Rather than being swallowed by his own strength, Weiss pushes himself forward through honest effort, striving to become someone both strong and courageous. The scene shifts to a classroom within the Noblesse Magic Academy. A female instructor stands before the newly enrolled students, congratulating them on their acceptance. This is Chloe, one of the Academy's instructors, now responsible for the class. She welcomes them all and expresses her intention to guide them from this point onward. As Weiss takes his seat, his gaze drifts to Alan sitting behind him. His thoughts return to the day of the entrance exam. He had defeated Alan there, just as he intended. At the time, Weiss had been overtaken by the emotions of the former Weiss, losing control and pushing Alan to the brink. Yet no matter how many times Alan was struck down, he continued to rise. Each time he stood back up, he grew stronger than before. In the end, Weiss secures victory by an overwhelming margin. Even so, it takes far longer to bring Alan down than he anticipated. The resistance leaves an impression that lingers. The frustration settles in quietly. To Weiss, the fight felt like a direct demonstration of what it truly means to face a protagonist head-on. The moment breaks when Chloe snaps her fingers. The entire class stiffens. Chloe draws their attention to the light appearing on the backs of their hands. Each student has been assigned a numerical value, 1,000 points. That is the starting amount granted to every enrollee. She explains that these points serve as a measure that will follow them throughout their time at the academy, all the way until graduation. Then she adds another detail. Based on his entrance exam performance, Weiss Vincent has been granted 2,000 points. Shock spreads instantly. Confusion and unrest ripple through the class as students struggle to understand the meaning behind the difference. Questions surface all at once, some wondering whether the points function as grades, others questioning the fairness of doubling Weiss's total from the very start. Chloe does not address the questions directly. Instead, she decides that experience will explain far more effectively than words ever could. She instructs everyone to take a wooden sword and proceed to the training grounds. Nervous tension settles over the students as they comply. Soon after, the entire class gathers outside. With everyone in position, Chloe signals the start of combat, marking the beginning of their first real trial as students of the Noblesse Magic Academy. Chloe follows up by clarifying what her earlier congratulations truly meant. Enrollment alone does not guarantee graduation. By now, the students are expected to understand the implication. Any student whose points are reduced to 0 will be expelled immediately, without exception. Today, they will continue fighting until someone's points are completely exhausted. Elsewhere, far from the academy grounds, Milk spends her time drinking. Several men around her lie beaten and unmoving as she sits among them with her alcohol in hand. Since Weiss left for the academy, the days have felt unusually empty. The absence has left her restless. With that thought, she comes to a decision. She will find something to occupy her time. Her answer is simple. She will obtain a teaching license at the Noblesse Magic Academy. In the classroom, a student approaches Weiss cautiously, confirming his identity. He introduces himself as Lewis, praising Weiss for his performance in the mock battle. He remarks on Weiss's skill and mentions that he has heard it was the highest score ever recorded. Cynthia and Lilith immediately project an unwelcoming aura, signaling Lewis to tread carefully. Louis Mysant, a striking, refreshing presence. In the original story, he had been a top student, graduating at the top of his class and showing exceptional potential. Now, that version of Lewis lies in ruins. His points have fallen to 0. Chloe approaches, her tone firm, questioning whether her earlier warning had been unclear. The declaration comes swiftly. Louis Mysant is expelled. The blow is crushing, delivered decisively by Alan, leaving no room for contest. Later, at the canteen, Weiss sits quietly, preparing his meal. A low frustration escapes him. The situation is spiraling out of his control. He had intended to maintain the scenario as faithfully as possible, limiting his actions to defeating Alan to keep the story intact. Yet now, the main heroine has unexpectedly become his fiancé. Louis, a student who was supposed to persist through graduation, is gone after the first day. The order of events he had anticipated is unraveling rapidly, and the chaos extends beyond simple circumstance. Worse still, the dark instincts of the original Weiss have begun surfacing within him. Since his encounter with Alan, that inner voice has urged him to act aggressively, not only toward Alan but toward everyone around him, pressing him toward impulses he struggles to restrain. He had intended to play carefully, to win trust slowly and subtly, but now the urge to crush everyone around him is growing stronger. He knows that if he gives in, if he allows those impulses to surface, he will be hated, just as the original Weiss had been. Nearby, Cynthia overhears his thoughts. She simply says that it sounds fine to her. If that is truly what he wants, she sees no issue. Weiss falls silent, unsettled by her calm acceptance. Cynthia turns her attention to the meal, thanking the cook for the delicious pot au feu. Weiss finds himself wondering why she does not even flinch at the notion of him harboring such dark desires. Cynthia's voice carries on, measured and clear. She reminds him that this is the Noblesse Magic Academy. She admits she had been slightly worried about him, knowing his natural inclination toward compassion. In a world governed by crush or be crushed, mercy is a liability. Yet, after observing his performance during the entrance test, Cynthia finds herself viewing him differently, reassessing the strength he has displayed. Weiss listens quietly. The chef approaches with another bowl of pot au feu, offering more food, but Cynthia declines. Lilith speaks up, her tone steady. She acknowledges the harshness of the competitive world. Those who choose to stand in it must be just as unyielding, just as ruthless. Then she adds something more personal. In the end, she says, doing what he truly wants is what matters most. She will support him no matter what he chooses. The sincerity of her words touches Weiss, leaving a quiet warmth amidst the turmoil inside him. The chef checks again if anyone wants more, noting the pot au feu is plentiful. Lilith politely declines, satisfied. Cynthia turns to Weiss with a small, encouraging smile. Since he is her fiancé, she tells him, he should carry the spirit to knock everyone else down. Weiss feels a quiet gratitude toward both of them. Behind them, The chef continues offering more pot au feu, but Weiss sets aside the meal. Speaking quietly, he admits that talking with Cynthia and Lilith helped put things into perspective. He is unsure if he can fully reconcile his thoughts just yet, but he is grateful for their presence and guidance. Lilith, ever practical, suggests an idea. She produces a coin, explaining that if Weiss cannot decide, he could leave the choice to fate. Weiss picks up the coin, contemplating. Leaving it to chance is an option. The scenario is already partially broken after all. If he cannot predict what will happen next, perhaps he should stop overthinking and let the coin decide everything. As Weiss tosses the coin into the air, the moment is cut short. From behind, the chef suddenly interrupts him. The coin slips from its path, strikes the ground, and rolls away across the floor. On one side of the coin is the image of the kingdom's castle. On the other is a dragon, the symbol of the strongest. If the castle side appears, Weiss will resist the impulse to avoid what lies ahead and make the effort to get along with Alan. If the dragon appears, the outcome will be different. The coin finishes its roll. Alan picks it up and returns it to Weiss. He apologizes for the delayed greeting, remarking that he managed to enroll despite his earlier defeat. Alan admits he is glad because he wanted to see Weiss again. No, more accurately, he wanted to fight him again. Weiss studies him, a grin forming. The coin lands. Tails. The mood shifts instantly. Weiss's resolve hardens. He, too, wants to fight Alan again. The scene moves to the battlefield. Weiss moves decisively, striking a student with a magic laser. The blow is swift, efficient. Chloe calls out, "Enough." Chris Schlegel, expelled. Another opponent, a large, powerful man, swings his fists. Weiss counters, striking decisively with his wooden sword. Gustav Gregorio, expelled. The list continues. Lehman Kudavireta, expelled. Karuna Kianik, expelled. Another student, unnamed, follows the same fate. One more's body is sent out of the ring, expelled. Nearby, Cynthia watches, clearly impressed. Lilith notes calmly that Weiss has removed 6 more rivals in a single day. In the forest, Weiss positions Cynthia and Lilith strategically, instructing them to flank and distract the remaining opponents. Lilith acknowledges the order without hesitation. In his mind, Weiss reflects on Alan. Thanks to him, there is no hesitation anymore. He will face Alan directly and tear the entire scenario apart. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the Noblesse Magic Academy, an unknown girl sits on her bed. She stares at the points on her hand. 22. The countdown has begun. Every day brings her closer to expulsion. She needs assistance, but what the future holds for her remains uncertain. The match ends with Team Weiss declared the winner. 1 month has passed since enrollment, and already 10 students have dropped out. Of those 10, 7 were eliminated through matches involving Weiss. On the announcement board, new training categories are posted: Magic Stealth, Magic Tracking, Magic Defense. Among the murmurs of the students, one result stands out. Weiss Vincent is ranked first in every field. Duke Billion confronts him from his seat, openly frustrated, questioning how someone could reach this level so quickly and what kind of training could produce such results. Duke is Cheryl's childhood friend, and he cannot hide his disbelief. He recalls the previous day's flag battle. Weiss had slipped past the magic threads Cheryl had set without hesitation, defeated Alan in a moment, and claimed the flag before anyone could react. That test alone earned him 5,700 points, placing him first in the entire year by a wide margin. To Duke, the gap feels unreal. Nearby, Cheryl cuts off his complaints, telling him to stop. Alan apologizes to both of them for losing to Weiss once again. Cheryl answers calmly, telling him not to dwell on it and to focus on winning next time. Then Cheryl looks directly at Weiss. He meets her gaze. He no longer vents frustration through underhanded behavior as he once did. In the past, that bitterness only led to isolation and ruin. Now, he releases everything through open competition, through matches fought within the rules. He has done nothing that warrants guilt, and he sees no reason for others to resent him. Still, under her sharp stare, he remains silent, holding his ground. At a nearby seat, Weiss notices Chloe standing over another student. Chloe addresses the girl directly, making it clear that if she fails to score any points in the next practical test, the outcome is already decided. The girl acknowledges it without protest and said that she's fine. Her name is Carta Viole. Chloe cuts her off, saying she never asked whether she was fine, and then walks away. From behind, Weiss watches Carta. In the original course of events, she is expelled after the next exam. Her frustration becomes the reason her best friend later takes her studies seriously and aims for graduation. That is how the side story was meant to unfold. Even though the match was fair, Weiss had been the one who drove her best friend into expulsion. After this, Carta was supposed to leave Noblesse Magic Academy quietly, without leaving any mark. Nearby, two students begin whispering and laughing. They mock Carta, asking what she plans to do in the next exam, knowing it will be a tag battle and that she has no partner. One of them adds that her closest friend has already been expelled. Carta stiffens, clearly irritated. The other student continues, bringing up how her best friend had been completely overwhelmed by Weiss in her last match, losing all her points at once. Weiss steps in and closes the distance. He turns toward Carta and offers to form a team with her, extending his hand. Later, the two stand together by the cliff. Carta questions his decision. She points out that she is on the verge of expulsion, while he is the top-ranked first year. She does not see how they could possibly be a good match. She also reminds him that he already has Cynthia. As she turns away, she notices Cynthia standing behind a tree, watching them. The look on Cynthia's face makes Carta falter. Weiss notices Carta's hesitation and asks what is wrong. He recognizes what she is worried about and tells her not to concern herself with his fiancé. Cynthia wants him to be the best in the academy, and she understands that partnering with someone else is simply a means to win. Carta denies that this is the issue. What unsettled her was the presence she felt moments earlier. When she looks back, Cynthia is no longer there. The space behind the tree is empty, and the sudden absence only deepens her confusion. Weiss asks her to focus. He makes it clear that he is not trying to help her out of sympathy. He does not have the time or energy to feel sorry for every student who is expelled. Carta keeps glancing behind her, unsure whether what she sensed was real or only in her head. The feeling does not fade. Weiss continues. He says that it would be a waste for her to be expelled. Her flying magic is genuinely impressive, something even skilled mages struggle to control. To him, it would be meaningless for someone who can wield it so precisely to leave the academy without being recognized. Carta remains unconvinced. She is certain she did not imagine it. Cynthia had been there. Weiss goes on, explaining that for the next exam, teaming up with her is simply the most efficient option. His decision is based on her ability. At that moment, Cynthia reveals herself. She acknowledges Carta's awareness, noting how she was able to sense even faint traces of magic that Weiss himself could not detect. She observes Carta closely, wondering whether her perception might be even sharper than Weiss's dark-eyed skill. Cynthia adds one more observation. Despite everything, Carta failed to notice Lilith, a student who has mastered assassination techniques. From directly behind Carta, Lilith suddenly appears. The movement startles her. Lilith explains that the upcoming tag battle will be a joint exam for all 3 school years. She notes that Weiss seems to have chosen a clear strategy, partnering with someone who possesses a special ability, rather than with fighters like herself or Cynthia, who can already contend alone even against second and third year students. Cynthia and Lilith step closer to Carta. Cynthia states that she will be pairing with Lilith. Lilith, in turn, tells Carta to take the exam together with Weiss. Weiss confirms that this is precisely why he chose her. With little time remaining before the exam, he says they will begin their special training immediately. Carta agrees through tears. And so, in preparation for the approaching test, Weiss's training with Carta begins. As Weiss and Carta walk together, he brings up flying magic. He notes that it is a difficult discipline to master, but that he is beginning to understand it. Carta responds plainly that he cannot even stay in the air for 2 seconds. From the start, the plan for the exam is for her to carry him while flying, so there is no real need for him to learn it. Weiss accepts that this is true for now, but says that the opportunity itself is rare. Carta is puzzled. Weiss explains that there is no harm in learning. Any form of magic can become a weapon, depending on how it is used, and at the moment, he happens to have a capable teacher walking beside him. He asks if she would be willing to teach him a little and apologizes for involving her in something unrelated to the exam. Carta is left without words. Weiss continues. In return, he tells her that he will not allow her to be expelled in tomorrow's test. Even after the exam, he asks whether she would continue helping him train in flying magic whenever she can. Carta lets out a quiet laugh and smiles. She reflects that rumors cannot be trusted. She never imagined that Weiss was someone who worked this hard. With a small giggle, she agrees, saying that if he is willing to work with her, she would be glad to help. In her thoughts, the image others spread of him as a lazy, disgraceful noble no longer holds. He is nothing like that. To her, he is someone who is always eager to learn, always willing to explore something new. A hard worker, just like Weiss. From a distance, Chloe watches Weiss and Carta walking together outside. Beside her, Jill studies the record sheets and remarks that Weiss Vincent's scores are almost unbelievable for an underclassman. More than half of the students who have been expelled were defeated by him alone. Chloe agrees. Weiss is certainly impressive, but she notes that this year's class is filled with exceptional students. The one who surprised her most was Darius's apprentice, Alan, someone who repeatedly clawed his way back from the edge of failure, returning stronger each time. And there are two others who left a lasting impression on her, Lilith and Cynthia. Their growth has been far beyond what anyone could have imagined when they first enrolled. They train as if their lives depend on it, discarding reinforced practice gear and engaging in dangerous combat with real swords instead of wooden ones. That relentless life-or-death approach has sharpened them into something far stronger than before. After a sparring session between Lilith and Cynthia, the two heal each other's injuries. Cynthia observes Lilith and acknowledges her ability. Lilith answers without hesitation, returning the praise to Cynthia. Cynthia then speaks of her resolve. She intends to grow stronger, not merely as someone who follows behind, but as an individual who can stand with pride. She wants to remain at Weiss's side as an equal. Lilith responds in kind. She also seeks greater strength for Weiss's sake. When he is in danger, she wants to be someone he can rely on. That is why she is determined to become stronger, far stronger than she is now. Lilith and Cynthia continue exchanging praise. Cynthia insists that Lilith is already strong enough. Lilith answers that she is still nowhere near Cynthia's level. Then their focus shifts. For now, they share a single, immediate objective, to pull Carta away from Weiss's side. The next morning, Carta lies in bed, trembling. A sudden chill runs through her, and she cannot explain why. The day of the exam arrives. Duke, Cheryl, and Alan face one another. Duke proposes leaving their pairing to chance with a round of rock, paper, scissors, declaring that whoever loses will have to team up with a random stranger. 1 round only, no hard feelings. Alan agrees. Cheryl dismisses his theatrics, but goes along with it. They make their choice. Nearby, Chloe announces the next destination. The following pair will be transported to Mount Gariel. Moments later, Weiss and Carta are sent to their starting point. Weiss states that they will follow their plan, targeting the upperclassmen with the highest points and taking them down first. He asks if Carta is ready. She answers that she is. A voice echoes from above. All students have now been transported to their assigned locations across the mountain. From this moment on, the joint 3-year tag survival test officially begins. Elsewhere, Milk lies back in a hammock, unbothered, having already taken lives again. A half-formed thought drifts through her mind, something she meant to do the other day, now forgotten. Then it comes back to her. She had planned to obtain a teaching license for Noblesse Magic Academy. The tag survival test had already begun. Ariel was suddenly electrocuted, his body seizing as pain tore through him. His scream echoed before his partner, Vivet, could fully grasp what was happening. Another student stood directly behind him, hidden until the moment it was already too late to react. An announcement followed shortly after. First-year student number 31, Ariel, and first-year student number 27, Vivet, were declared unable to continue. Both were ordered to be sent back to Noblesse Magic Academy. Nearby, Liddy let out a laugh, dismissing the first years as easy targets who failed to notice even a simple trap. His partner responded with caution, warning against underestimating underclassmen and mentioning rumors of a remarkable student among this year's first years. Liddy brushed it off without concern, treating the idea as meaningless. He continued, asserting that all the famous students from their year had already been expelled. His partner agreed, adding that every one of them had amounted to nothing more than empty talk. The partner then tried to recall the name of the first year he had heard about, believing it was Weiss Vincent. As he turned toward Liddy, he found him already collapsed on the ground, struck down before he could even react. Weiss stood nearby, wearing a sharp, unsettling smile. The second-year student froze in shock as another announcement rang out. Second-year student number 10, Liddy, was declared unable to continue. Anger surged through Liddy's partner. He immediately released a fire spell toward Weiss. Weiss avoided it cleanly, slipping past the attack as the flames tore through the space where he had been standing. The second-year student lifted his gaze. Weiss appeared above, descending from the sky in a swift motion. Even as a basic spell, the fire attack carried dense, concentrated magical power, befitting a second year of Noblesse Academy. The spell had been cast without an incantation, executed with speed and precision that reflected solid training. Weiss noticed the star on the second-year student's shoulder, the mark awarded for outstanding academic performance. That single detail was enough for him to recognize the opponent's level. From that point on, there was no reason to hold back. Descending from above, Weiss moved in to strike. Mid-fall, an unnatural wall appeared, allowing him to rebound instantly and evade the counterattack coming his way. The second-year student hesitated in disbelief as Weiss shifted direction in midair. The movement repeated again, sharper and faster, before Weiss surged straight forward. A rapid sequence of strikes followed in one continuous motion. Weiss passed through his opponent without stopping. Moments later, the second-year student collapsed. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Carta finished burying half of another student's body, the fight there already decided. Weiss had not mastered flying magic, but he had developed a different technique in its place. By combining dark, light, and non-elemental magic, he formed a transparent structure known as the unnatural wall. It could be created in midair and used as a temporary foothold. The wall existed only for the instant needed to push off, vanishing immediately after. The farther Weiss was from the ground, the greater the mana cost, limiting how high he could go. Even with those constraints, it was more than sufficient. The technique significantly broadened his tactical range. In that sense, his time spent learning flying magic had already proven its value. All of a sudden, Weiss sensed an incoming strike from behind. His barrier reacted instantly, blocking the attack before it could reach him. The student who launched it froze in disbelief. Before he could recover, another attack closed in from nearby and struck him directly, sending his body flying and leaving him unable to continue. From above, Carta descended, having delivered the blow. She apologized to Weiss for the sudden attack. She explained that she had tried to signal him about another team approaching. When he failed to notice, she chose to act immediately and struck him instead. Weiss dismissed the concern and acknowledged that her decision was correct. Unseen behind the trees, another student listened closely as Weiss remarked on how Carta had taken down her opponent with a single strike. Carta responded by pointing out the automatic activation of the barrier. The hidden student grasped the situation. He stepped out from cover and revealed himself. Observing their exchange, he noted that the defensive magic appeared to be a combination of dark and light attributes. He recognized that both Weiss and Carta possessed high-spec abilities, but judged them to be inefficient, unable to be used repeatedly. Weiss identified him as the partner of the student they had just defeated. The student warned Weiss not to grow overconfident after defeating what he dismissed as weak opponents. He stated plainly that Weiss had no chance of winning against him. Archimedes laughed as a powerful aura burst outward, his presence swelling as he removed his glasses. His combat strength rose sharply, the increase clear even without measurement. While he focused on asserting that advantage, Weiss was already setting his next move. Weiss activated dark healing magic. Archimedes felt his strength being steadily drained. Confusion crossed his face as he failed to recognize the technique. The effect was not recorded in any of the information he had prepared. Without hesitation, Weiss charged forward. He closed the distance in an instant and struck cleanly, passing straight through Archimedes. The second year collapsed behind him, his body unable to keep up. Archimedes was declared unable to continue. Another opponent was down. Weiss turned to Carta and urged her to maintain their pace and continue collecting points from overconfident upperclassmen. Carta checked her score and paused. Her points had surged, climbing from 22 to 1,336. Elsewhere in the forest, Alan and Cheryl encountered Lilith and Cynthia as the two groups crossed paths. They faced one another in silence before Cynthia stepped forward, proposing a brief bout to pass the time. Quick break. Like and subscribe if you appreciate the work that goes into this manga. Meanwhile, Weiss continued eliminating opponents elsewhere. He informed Carta that the second and third year students had completely stopped showing up. Carta observed that they no longer seemed to be in the area. Weiss concluded that the repeated announcements from the magic birds about knocked out students had driven them into hiding. The presence of a strong opponent had made them cautious. With that realization, he dismissed their attempts to flee as meaningless as he and Carta took to the air. He shifted their focus away from the first-year students and toward hunting the second and third years. Carta followed that decision without hesitation. Weiss had chosen to team up with Carta because of her rare abilities. Her flying magic, which even veteran mages struggled to control, combined with her exceptional detection skills, gave them a decisive advantage. While surveying the area, Carta detected a presence and identified the target as likely a third year, noting the precision with which their magic was concealed. Weiss immediately descended from above. Using flight and detection, they could cover a wide area and launch sudden attacks from the sky. In a forest, strikes from directly overhead were difficult to defend against, and the swarm of magic birds made it even harder to distinguish Weiss from anything human. The attack landed cleanly from behind, and the student fell. In this world, surprise attacks carried overwhelming force. Unaware opponents rarely maintained defensive magic, making strikes from blind spots almost always decisive. A single clean hit was enough to end a fight. That principle was the reason Weiss's mentor had repeatedly drilled into him the importance of taking the first move. As they gauged the remaining time, Carta estimated that they had about 20 minutes left. The assessment immediately tightened the pace. Weiss reacted with visible frustration and pressed Carta to accelerate the search for third-year students. Carta was caught off guard and urged restraint, noting that they had already secured a sufficient number of points and that there was no need to push further into danger. Weiss remained unsatisfied. What they had earned so far was nowhere near enough. He reminded Carta that the point system carried special privileges, and that higher totals meant greater rewards. He laid out the structure plainly. Reaching C rank at 5,000 points granted a private room. B rank, at 10,000 points, upgraded that to a luxurious private suite. A rank, at 15,000 points, came with a full tuition waiver. S rank, at 20,000 points, allowed a student to skip grades and graduate early. At present, Weiss stood at C rank. As first-year students advanced into the second and third years, overall numbers dropped sharply, while the proportion of B-SOS and A-rank students increased. Even so, throughout the Academy's long history, not a single student had ever reached S rank. The implication was clear. Carta grasped that Weiss was targeting upperclassmen with that unreachable rank in mind. Weiss corrected the assumption. His immediate objective was B rank. Reaching S rank someday remained a distant ambition, but it was not what mattered to him now. What mattered was that the B rank private room came with unlimited access to premium fruits through room service. That realization settled it for Carta. Weiss reflected on his past training. About a year earlier, during a period of relentless Spartan discipline, dessert after meals had been his only comfort. As the training intensified, even that small pleasure faded and his sense of taste for fruit dulled. Then one day, Zevis prepared something different for him, the super premium fruit known as mellow melon. That day, Weiss recovered the sense of taste he had once lost. The experience was that extraordinary. Mellow melon was notoriously difficult to obtain, yet the B-rank service offered it without limit. With that memory driving him, Weiss made his intent clear. During this exam, he planned to harvest points from the upperclassmen to taste that flavor again. His intensity softened as he shifted his approach. He appealed directly to Carta, seeking her cooperation until the very end. Carta agreed, acknowledging that he had been supporting her as well. From Carta's perspective, Weiss's drive during the exam had seemed unusual. She had never imagined it was rooted in food. Her own family cultivated mellow melons, and the thought crossed her mind that if Weiss ever learned that fact, he might insist on visiting. The moment passed as a sudden disturbance erupted nearby. A massive pillar of dark smoke and energy burst upward from the ground. Both of them were stunned by the sight. Even without careful analysis, it was clear that what stood there was a true monster. Carta immediately judged that whoever had caused it was far beyond normal standards. She urged withdrawal, recognizing the danger. But when she turned back, Weiss had already touched down. He surged forward toward the source of the smoke. There, he found a girl seated calmly at the center of the disturbance. She identified him as the rumored Weiss Vincent. Weiss recognized her at once as Eva Everell, a second-year student. Acknowledging her reputation, he stepped forward and initiated a match. Eva accepted the challenge with clear enthusiasm, welcoming the chance to face Weiss in battle. Eva Everell stood at the pinnacle of the academy. She was regarded as the strongest student, often labeled the true final boss, an official cheater, a game-breaking existence beyond anything the academy had produced. Her power was so overwhelming that academy life had long since lost its appeal. After this exam, she intended to leave on her own terms. Within the academy's history, she remained undefeated, a figure no challenger had ever overcome. If Weiss was going to face her, this was the only moment. With only 10 minutes remaining, he committed everything he had to this single confrontation. Defeating her here would bring the exam arc to its conclusion. With that resolve, Weiss launched himself forward at full strength. At the same time, another battle continued elsewhere. Cheryl had already fallen, leaving Alan facing Lilith and Cynthia alone. Cynthia assessed the situation, Noting that Alan was the last one standing, while Lilith dismissed any sentimentality, they set their sights on Alan, believing that defeating someone even Weiss had failed to fully overcome would earn his recognition. With no room left to retreat, they pressed him to brace himself. Alan's restraint finally broke. A violent surge of aura erupted from him, flooding the area with pressure. The sudden release caught Lilith and Cynthia off guard, stopping them in place as the intensity washed over them. The exam comes to an end, leaving behind the clear aftermath of the duel between Eva and Weiss. The damage across the field speaks for itself. Weiss is left exhausted and struggling to catch his breath, while Eva remains composed, showing no visible fatigue. She acknowledges his ability and notes that she had not expected him to push her far enough to require magic. Weiss recognizes that she had still been holding back. Weiss understands then just how overwhelming Eva Everil truly is. Absolute barrier, dark eye, dark heel. Every option he possessed had already been used. None of them had made any difference. No matter what he tried, nothing had reached her. Eva remarks that she had grown tired of the academy and originally planned to leave after the exam. However, her interest has been caught by Weiss. Because of that, she decides to remain at the academy for a while longer. An announcement soon follows, informing all students that they will be returned to the Noblesse Magic Academy. Once again, the situation shifts because of Weiss. Eva remains enrolled, and Carta avoids expulsion. Weiss then learns that Cynthia and Lilith were defeated. The result leaves him stunned, unable to immediately accept it, and he wonders who could have accomplished such a thing. Cynthia apologizes to Lilith, admitting that she became carried away by the belief that she had grown stronger, that overconfidence led to their defeat, and she regrets having dragged Lilith into the fight and causing her to suffer alongside her. Lilith responds by taking the blame upon herself, believing her weakness stained Cynthia's battle record. Hearing their exchange, Weiss pieces together the truth and realizes that Alan was the one who defeated them. Weiss turns his gaze toward Alan, who meets his eyes in silence. With that, the joint 3-year tag exam comes to a close. Life at the academy soon returns to its usual rhythm. Not long after the exam, Weiss is promoted to B rank and gains access to a far more comfortable lifestyle. Competition remains constant, but facing lower-ranked students gradually becomes unsatisfying. For a time, it seems as though those peaceful days might continue. That calm ends when Chloe announces the introduction of a guest instructor for the day. When the instructor steps forward and greets the class, shock spreads through the room. Some react openly to her appearance, while Weiss's vision slowly begins to turn red. It is revealed that the new instructor is Milk. Weiss falls into disbelief, immediately realizing that the nightmare he thought was long gone has returned. Milk takes control of the class and formally assumes responsibility for combat training from that day onward. She introduces herself and opens the floor for questions. Duke Billion raises his hand and asks why she has ended up there as a substitute instructor. Nearby, Weiss feels a small sense of relief that Duke Billion voiced the very question he himself wanted to ask. At the same time, Weiss begins to question why Milk has appeared there at all, and what reason she could possibly have for being assigned to them. Milk dismisses the question as pointless and refuses to explain further. Duke Billion is left visibly embarrassed by the response. Weiss senses something off about Milk's attitude. Soon after, Chloe steps in and explains the situation. The academy is currently short on instructors. Since the recent tag test, many upperclassmen have been requesting additional combat training outside regular classes. To meet that demand, the academy has been forced to bring in extra instructors. Weiss fixes his gaze on Milk and quickly understands the situation. The upperclassmen are fired up, unwilling to let underclassmen look down on them. To Weiss, hiring Milk as an instructor feels like the worst possible decision. Milk suddenly turns her attention directly to Weiss and calls out his name. He is caught off guard as she questions whether he is thinking about something unnecessary. Weiss is shaken, unable to understand how she noticed. He denies it, explaining that he was only distracted for a moment. Milk accepts the explanation without pressing further. Sometime later, training moves to the mountain. Milk orders Weiss to begin push-ups while burdened with a heavy stack of weights. Weiss struggles under the load, his movement slowing as the pressure bears down on him. As she observes, Milk remarks that Weiss appears to have improved significantly over the past few months. Weiss comes to believe that Milk's appearance at the academy is likely meant solely to torment him. Nearby students notice that Weiss is unusually attentive during training. They quietly question what is going on with the substitute instructor. Milk catches their behavior and shifts her attention toward them, fixing them with an intimidating stare. She criticizes their running and openly judges the academy as being filled with spoiled students. Milk then declares that everyone present must continue climbing the mountain until sunset. For Weiss alone, the order is harsher, requiring him to climb while continuing his push-ups. Weiss refuses politely, judging the task to be impossible. With Milk's arrival, combat training transforms into something far worse. What was already harsh becomes unbearable, a hell layered atop another. As training days draw near, the students begin to tremble in fear. Yet on this particular day, they learn that even the harshest deserts can contain an oasis. That day, the boys' class is led to a swimming pool. Weiss questions the purpose of the location, while the other students wonder what Milk is planning this time. Soon after, one student notices a group of girls approaching. Milk arrives shortly afterward and acknowledges the delay. She announces that the day's lesson will be water training. The boys erupt into chaos at the sight before them as the girls are dressed in bikinis. Milk immediately scolds them for their behavior, labeling them immature. Among them, Alan stands out as he remains calm and unaffected. Because the instructor finally lost patience with the boys' constant disruptions, water training was never held again. In the cafeteria, several students noticed Carta sitting alone, as she often did. They pointed out that she always ate by herself and remarked that she never joined Weiss's group. Carta explained that Weiss already had Cynthia with him, and that joining them would only make her feel like she was in the way. The students laughed in agreement. They added that in the end, Weiss and Carta had only been partners for the tag team exercise. They went further, claiming that Carta had avoided expulsion only by clinging to Weiss during that incident, and they told her she should properly thank him for it. Carta responded with a sharp, angry glare. The students immediately reacted to her expression, questioning her attitude. From nearby, Cynthia and Lilith noticed the situation unfolding. The students continued, calling Carta a parasite who was only good at flying and accusing her of clinging to the academy by leeching off someone stronger. They claimed that without Weiss beside her, they could have her expelled at any time, and they warned her to be prepared. At that moment, Cynthia and Lilith approached Carta and called out to her. Cynthia then asked if she would like to eat together with them. Carta looked at them with visible unease. To her, it felt as though one problem had barely passed before another appeared. As they sat together, Cynthia calmly explained that she had reconsidered her opinion of Carta. She mentioned the recent joint tag team exam, noting that Carta and Weiss had defeated 24 students, including second and third years. Cynthia acknowledged that it was not a small achievement and that the number itself was record-breaking. Carta brushed it off, insisting that Weiss had accomplished everything on his own. From across the table, Lilith responded that even for Weiss, achieving something like that alone would have been unlikely. Lilith pointed out that the result had only been possible because of Carta's flight magic and her overall capability. Even if they themselves had teamed up with Weiss, matching that score would have been impossible. Cynthia admitted that the outcome frustrated her, acknowledging that both she and Lilith had been completely defeated. Lilith then asked Carta to continue looking after Weiss from now on. Carta became visibly flustered. Cynthia's expression softened as she explained that she and Lilith had wanted to talk to Carta for a long time. She asked why Carta kept avoiding them. When Carta tried to explain herself, Cynthia stopped her, saying it was fine. She made it clear that from now on, the three of them, together with Weiss, would get along. Carta's expression finally relaxed, and she smiled with genuine relief. She then wondered aloud where Weiss was at that moment. Elsewhere, Weiss lay resting in his bed, unable to move properly due to injuries sustained during the water training with Milk. He asked if Milk would heal him already, but Milk declined with polite firmness. After that incident, the training Carta had undergone with Weiss bore clear results. During the exam, she turned the tables on the students who had harassed her, overwhelming them with her own ability. The confrontation ended with those same bullies being expelled. Meanwhile, Alan recalled the day his village was engulfed in flames. On that day, he lost both his family and the place he once called home. Several months earlier, Cheryl had told Alan about the Noblesse Magic Academy. She explained that graduating from the academy could grant authority equal to that of a noble. Even commoners, once graduated, would gain access to dungeons across the world, and travel between nations would become far easier. To Alan, that meant one thing. With his own strength, he could one day hunt down and destroy the monster responsible for taking everything from him. With that resolve, he decided to take the entrance exam for the Noblesse Academy. With Cheryl and Master Darius supporting his training, Alan prepared as best he could. However, when the exam ended, the results were disastrous. Weiss Vincent stood out as overwhelmingly powerful, far beyond expectation. Alan was certain he had failed, yet for reasons unclear to him, he still passed. The relief of success did not last long. After enrollment, the Academy's point system pushed him to the brink again and again, nearly causing repeated failure. He remembered a student approaching him, mocking him as the one Weiss had easily beaten, calling him nothing more than convenient material for point farming. Alan refused to accept a life where everything continued to be taken from him. Without realizing it, Weiss was always watching him. It appeared that Weiss had begun to see Alan as someone worth facing. As the top-ranked first year, Weiss stood far ahead, yet Alan sensed recognition there. He felt the same pull toward Weiss and wanted another chance to fight him. Alan resolved to catch up, to win, and to keep winning. This time, he intended to defeat Weiss. Returning to the present, Alan's rising anger drew Weiss's attention. He confronted him directly, making it clear that he had expected far more from him. Before Alan walked away, he made it clear that he hated Weiss. Weiss responded with equal bluntness, telling him the feeling was mutual. Nearby students noticed the tension and whispered among themselves, curious about what the two had been arguing over. A short while later, Weiss was seen practicing with his swords. Milk watched from nearby, noting his effort with quiet approval. Weiss admitted that his thoughts kept drifting, and Milk asked if they were about Alan. She mentioned that Darius had told her Weiss and Alan didn't seem to get along. Weiss explained that Alan's softness frustrated him, recalling the moment in history class earlier that day. The lesson had covered the country's treatment of slaves and demi-humans. In the classroom, Weiss had stood and argued that most slaves came from poor families and were left with little education or guidance. They either fell into crime or perished in the streets. He had insisted that the system itself wasn't inherently evil, presenting it as a form of societal control. Alan had listened without responding, but his silence hid disagreement. That lack of reaction had only stoked Weiss's anger. He confronted Alan in the hallway afterward. Weiss told Milk that Alan had openly called slavery evil and questioned the necessity of nobles themselves. Coming from someone who rarely showed emotion, and in front of a crowd of nobles, those words had carried weight. Weiss admitted that while many might have been shocked, it was Alan's straightforward, naive way of speaking that particularly irritated him. Weiss continued, criticizing Alan's insistence that war was simply bad. He argued that saying so without offering solutions amounted to empty preaching. Alan spoke as if avoiding conflict would resolve everything, but Weiss pointed out that even if slavery were abolished, war would still exist. He asked what would happen to the children who lost their parents, dismissing Alan's ideals as naive. Those who could, Weiss insisted, should act rather than indulge in lofty ideals. He added that people lived for desire, sleep, food, intimacy, and in this world, there was also the desire to fight. Lofty ideals, Weiss said, carried little meaning. Milk grew slightly bored but remained attentive. When Weiss asked if she was listening, she hesitated before confirming. She reminded Weiss that Alan had grown up in an orphanage, suggesting that his reactions might have struck him more deeply than he realized. Milk acknowledged why Alan might lose his temper, but admitted she had not expected Weiss to get so worked up over a classroom debate. She asked if it was because his opponent had been Alan. Weiss fell silent. Quietly, he realized that his intense reaction had come from the previous version of himself. He wondered if that earlier self had truly hated Alan so much. Milk noted that clashing opinions were not inherently bad, though she pointed out that as adults, such freedom to argue was often restricted. She then tossed Weiss a wooden sword, telling him to brace himself. They began sparring. During the match, Milk instructed Weiss to keep his movements minimal. He acknowledged her advice and swung, but she easily dodged and countered with a kick to his back, pointing out that he still didn't fully grasp the lesson. Charging forward, Milk commented that it felt nostalgic to see Weiss fight this way, recalling her own days as a student of the academy. Weiss reacted with quiet disbelief, absorbing her words as the sparring continued. Milk spoke of clashing with people of all kinds, explaining that in the academy, such conflicts were inevitable. Weiss, familiar with her profile from the original game, had never heard her speak like this. She admitted that she had kept this part of herself hidden, even choosing not to remember it, until circumstances forced her out of the academy. Weiss reacted with quiet surprise. She recounted that back then, even the point system wasn't fully refined. She had been expelled before she could demonstrate her full strength. At the time, she had made excuses, but in truth, she simply wasn't strong enough. Weiss protested, insisting she couldn't have been weak. Milk explained that everyone started weak, and she had overestimated her own abilities. The gap between expectation and reality had determined her fate. A man observed them silently as they sparred. Milk reflected that humans didn't change easily, but Weiss had. She added that it was natural to get lost sometimes, that collisions and conflicts were necessary, yet one's convictions must be carried through. Unlike her, she said, Weiss already knew the right path. Weiss fell silent, noting that Milk was unusually kind today. She shrugged, insisting that she was always kind, and suggesting that anyone could be, in their own way. She reminded him that after sparring, they needed to prepare for his next exercise. Weiss realized it was already time. Milk outlined the challenge. His next exercise was survival training in the northern Gharial Mountains, a brutal trial where monsters roamed and mistakes could be fatal. Expulsion would not be the only consequence of failure. Weiss dismissed the warning, confident he would survive. She admitted that she had once failed by overestimating her own strength and did not want Weiss to repeat her mistakes. She reminded him not to become arrogant just because he had been the top student in the lower grades. Weiss acknowledged her point. He asked if they should spar a little longer. Milk agreed, ready. As they prepared to clash, the man observing shouted that lights were out and switched off the lamps, plunging the room into darkness. Milk declared that they would rest for the day, and Weiss agreed. The Noblesse Magic Academy's training combat uniform was designed to activate when the wearer took damage, as long as it was used within a magic circle prepared in advance. Upon activation, it drained a significant amount of magic power. In return, it reduced injury and dulled pain. Because of these uniforms, students were able to fight each other seriously while remaining safe. Through this system, the Academy had produced many individuals who overwhelmingly surpassed graduates of other institutions. That advantage, however, was not absolute. The instructor informed the class that there were enemies in this world against whom the uniforms were meaningless. Those enemies were monsters. The next day's exercise would be a survival drill in the northern Gharial Mountains, a region inhabited by such creatures. Withdrawal was allowed, but the class was also informed that doing so would negatively affect their grades. Those who were prepared were instructed to sign their names. Weiss stood first and joined the line. Cynthia followed, then Lilith. After signing, Weiss returned to his seat and addressed Alan, suggesting withdrawal. The suggestion immediately drew resistance, and Alan refused without hesitation. Cheryl also made it clear she had no intention of backing out and questioned the sudden proposal. Weiss offered no real explanation, brushing it off as something he felt like saying. Weiss moved on, leaving Cheryl puzzled by his behavior. Once all the students had signed, the instructor expressed his thanks and confirmed that everyone would be participating. With that, the event was set in motion. Everything up to this point had merely been preparation. From here on, the real test began. The Academy's expulsion system was, in its own way, merciful. By eliminating those who lacked the necessary ability early, it reduced the number of students who would later lose their lives to meaningless deaths. From this point onward, failure would no longer end with simple expulsion. After the hike, the class arrived deep within the Gharial Mountains, and the survival exercise began. The duration was set at 3 days. Students were instructed to form pairs and endure the forest together. As stated before, the mountains were home to a large and unspecified number of monsters. Defeating monsters would earn points, but that was secondary. Survival itself was emphasized as the highest priority. It was explained that, similar to the previous tag test, each pair would be transported to different locations across the mountain range. Even within the exercise, the environment was subject to chance. A sudden blizzard represented the worst possible condition. Combined with the nature of the exercise, the setting weighed heavily, further darkening Weiss's mood. Since the pairings had already been decided, the instructor began calling names and instructed those selected to step forward. Shirley Elias and Lilith Scarlet were announced as a pair. It differed from the original arrangement, but the overall scenario was unlikely to change. Next came Cynthia Violetta and Alan. This pairing matched the original course of events. Cynthia stood as the central heroine of this survival exercise. Under normal circumstances, this trial would have brought the two closer together. At least that was how it was meant to unfold. Cynthia reaffirmed her devotion to Weiss, and he accepted her words. Even so, A quiet sense of unease lingered within him, as if things would not proceed as expected. Nearby, Alan and Shirley exchanged firm words of resolve. Both showed clear confidence, each unwilling to yield before the trial had even begun. Other students observed Shirley and Alan together and quietly noted how naturally they matched, to the point where it seemed as though they were already a couple. From the outside, it looked like nothing could come between them. Weiss found himself questioning how, despite having someone like Shirley, Alan would later form such an intimate bond with Cynthia. It was not a matter of recklessness or betrayal. Rather, this moment marked the end. The brief exchange just witnessed would become the final conversation Shirley and Alan would ever share. As Weiss remained lost in thought, Carta informed him that his name had been called. Weiss reacted with brief surprise before turning his attention forward. Duke Billion stepped forward and was announced as Weiss's partner. They were instructed to work together for the next 3 days, bound by the conditions of the exercise. Within this trial, Alan's already harsh life was about to suffer another severe blow. In order to endure it, his connection with Cynthia would rapidly deepen. The event that would become the single greatest catalyst for their bond was yet to come. It would be the death of Shirley Elias during this very training exercise.